Have you ever noticed what you're doing right now? Maybe you're listening to this while finishing something you promised yourself you'd handle alone. Again. You're tired, but the thought pops up automatically. I'll just do it myself, it's easier. Not because it actually is, but because asking for help feels heavier than carrying the weight alone. And you don't even question it anymore. You don't reach out. Not because you don't need support, but because something inside your chest tightens at the idea of depending on anyone. It's almost physical, a quiet reflex, like your body already knows the answer before your mind even finishes the thought. People probably describe you as strong, independent, self-sufficient, the one who always figures things out, the one who doesn't need much. And maybe you've learned to wear that label well. But what if that independence didn't start as confidence? What if it started as protection? The truth is, psychology shows that some forms of extreme independence aren't really personality traits at all. They're trauma responses, learned patterns, the nervous system adapting to moments when relying on others didn't feel safe, reliable, or possible. And if you're already feeling that quiet recognition right now, this is important to hear. You're not broken, you're not weak, and you're not doing life wrong. What you're about to understand isn't about changing who you are. It's about finally understanding why you became this way. Because there are a few very specific things highly independent people do, things most people praise, that are actually signals your nervous system learned long ago to protect you. And the first one might feel uncomfortably familiar. It usually looks small, ordinary. Like tonight, when you stayed up later than you should, fixing one more thing on your own while telling yourself it's fine, you've got it under control. Your phone is right there, but you don't reach for it. You don't tell anyone you're overwhelmed. If someone asks how you're doing, the answer comes out automatically. I'm fine, even when you're not, especially when you're not. And part of you doesn't even consider asking for help as an option. It feels easier to carry everything yourself than to explain what's going on inside. From a psychological point of view, the brain doesn't forget moments when asking for help didn't feel safe. It remembers the tone, the silence, the disappointment. And if, at some point, help didn't come, or it came with conditions, criticism, or made you feel like a burden, your brain quietly learned a rule: don't rely on anyone. Not as a belief you chose, but as a pattern your nervous system locked in to protect you. So now, dependence triggers something deeper. Your nervous system equates needing others with danger, exposure, or loss of control. What little people realize is that independence in this form isn't confidence, it's a shield, a way to stay ahead of disappointment before it has a chance to happen. Maybe you had to grow up fast. Maybe you were the strong one too early, the one who didn't get to fall apart because someone else already was. Maybe you learned that being capable was safer than being cared for. And that's the part that matters. This wasn't weakness. It was adaptation. Your system did exactly what it needed to do to survive. But once you see this, something starts to shift, because this same pattern shows up in another area of independence that most people completely misunderstand, and it runs even deeper than asking for help. At first, you don't even notice it happening. Things are good. You're talking more, sharing a little more of yourself, letting someone in. And then, right when the connection starts to deepen, something inside you pulls back. You reply slower, you change the subject, you suddenly feel crowded even though no one did anything wrong. When someone offers emotional support, instead of relief, you feel trapped, almost irritated. You tell yourself you just value your space, yet somehow you still end up feeling independent and lonely at the same time. The truth is, closeness doesn't just mean closeness to your brain, it activates old emotional memories. From a psychological perspective, when intimacy once came with pain, inconsistency, or abandonment, the brain made a quiet association. Connection equals risk. So distance became safety. Not because you don't want people, but because your system learned that getting too close meant something could be taken away. So even when your mind wants connection, your body goes into protection mode. Your nervous system tightens, scans for danger, and urges you to step back before you get hurt. And this part matters. If closeness feels unsafe, it doesn't mean you're heartless, detached, or incapable of love. It means your system learned caution. You're not rejecting people, you're protecting yourself. You're not cold, you're careful. And once you start to see that, another pattern begins to make sense too, because this same need for safety shows up in how you relate to control, certainty, and unpredictability in your life. And that's where things start to get really revealing. You like to know what's coming next. You plan things in advance, stick to routines, think through every possible outcome. Spontaneity sounds fun in theory, but in practice it makes your chest tighten. When plans change last minute or things feel uncertain, your body reacts before your mind does. Tension, restlessness, a quiet sense of unease. You tell yourself you're just organized, disciplined, responsible. But deep down, unpredictability doesn't feel neutral to you. It feels unsafe. What few people notice is that control often comes from chaos. From a psychological point of view, when life once felt unpredictable, the brain learned a very simple rule. Control equals safety. So you started creating structure, not to dominate life, but to steady it. Control calms the nervous system. Knowing what happens next helps your body relax. It's not about being rigid or obsessive. It's about keeping your internal world from tipping into overwhelm. Order became the way you breathed easier. Maybe emotions around you were unpredictable when you were younger. Maybe the adults in your life were inconsistent, warm one moment, distant the next. Maybe you learned early that staying alert, prepared, and in control was the best way to avoid emotional whiplash. And when you see it this way, the story changes. Control wasn't about power, it was about survival. But here's where it gets interesting, because this same pattern of control doesn't just affect how you plan your days. It also shapes how you treat your own needs and emotions, often without you even realizing it. You barely notice when you do it. Something hurts, something feels heavy, and almost immediately another voice takes over. It's not that bad. Others have it worse. I'll deal with it later. You downplay your own discomfort so fast it feels automatic, like you're cutting yourself off mid-sentence. You keep moving, keep functioning, keep showing up, even when something inside you is asking to slow down and be felt. Your needs don't disappear, they just get postponed, again and again. From a psychological perspective, ignoring your needs can be learned. If, at some point, expressing emotions led to dismissal, punishment, or being made to feel like you were too much, the brain adapted by choosing silence. It learned that staying quiet was safer than being honest. So the nervous system found another solution. It gently shut feelings down to avoid pain. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough to keep you going, enough to protect you from disappointment. Maybe you were the easy child, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who didn't ask for much because you sensed there wasn't much to give. Maybe you learned early that being low maintenance kept the peace, and over time, that became a habit so ingrained it felt like your personality. But here's the shift that matters. You didn't lose your emotions, you protected them. And when you really understand that, one final pattern starts to surface, one that shows up when you finally stop, rest, or let yourself depend on someone else. And that reaction might explain more than you think. The moment you finally stop, that's when it hits. You sit down to rest, and instead of relief, a quiet guilt creeps in. You feel lazy for slowing down, restless for doing nothing. Even when someone offers to help, part of you resists, not because you don't need it, but because accepting support makes you feel weak, exposed, almost uncomfortable in your own skin. Downtime doesn't feel safe. It feels wrong, like you're breaking an unspoken rule. But truth is, your worth became tied to self-reliance. Somewhere along the way, your brain learned a simple but powerful message. If I stop, I'm unsafe. So staying busy, capable, and independent became more than habits. They became proof of value. From that place, rest feels like failure, and needing someone feels like losing control. Independence slowly stopped being something you do and became who you are. But this is the turning point most people miss. Rest isn't weakness, it's regulation. It's how the nervous system repairs, recalibrates, and remembers that safety doesn't always have to be earned through effort. And when that idea starts to land, really land, something important shifts. Because once you see rest differently, you're ready to understand what to actually do with all of this awareness. And that's where things finally begin to change. So what do you actually do with this once you see it? Not fix yourself, not force change. The first step isn't changing, it's understanding. Letting this land without judgment. Because when you realize these patterns were learned to protect you, something softens. You stop fighting yourself. You stop asking, what's wrong with me, and start asking, what happened to me? From there, the shifts can be small, almost invisible. You practice asking for help in low-risk moments, not when you're drowning, just when it feels slightly uncomfortable. You let someone support you briefly, without explaining, without overcompensating, without immediately taking control back. Just long enough for your nervous system to notice nothing bad happened. Safety doesn't collapse when you lean, even for a second. And this is the reframe that changes everything. You don't need to stop being independent. That strength is real. You earned it. You just don't have to be alone anymore. Independence doesn't disappear when you allow connection. It matures. It becomes a choice instead of a reflex. You get to choose now, not from fear, not from old survival rules, but from awareness. And once that choice becomes available to you, the way you see yourself and your past starts to shift in a way most people never expect. If you saw yourself in this, let me say it clearly. Nothing is wrong with you. The way you learned to be independent wasn't random, and it wasn't a flaw. It made sense. It worked. Your independence once kept you safe, helped you survive, helped you stay grounded when you didn't feel supported. And there's no shame in that. There's intelligence in it. There's resilience in it. But you're not in the same place anymore. And now you get to keep the strength without carrying the weight alone. You get to choose connection without losing yourself. You get to rest without guilt. You get to be capable and supported at the same time. That's not weakness. That's growth. That's what healing actually looks like. If this resonated with you, take a second to like the video. It helps this reach people who quietly need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more psychology explained in a human, grounded way. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, the one who's always strong, consider sharing this with them. Sometimes the people who hold it all together are the ones who need this message the most.